vital for the West Des Moines community and the region. And today we have our top experts in real estate. And it is such an honor and a pleasure to have in our midst Chris Costa, Kevin Crowley, Kyle Gamble, Richard Hurd, and Paul Rupprecht. You know, these folks represent our big dreamers, our big doers, and our incredible experts in this industry. So I think that's a true testament as to we have so many people here. They're excited to learn from you. And I am so pleased that Kathy Bolten, senior staff writer for the Business Record, is going to be moderating this really engaging event today. We are taping it, so if you want to refer back to it, you can visit our YouTube channel. There's lots of great programming there, including this. Today, make sure your mics are muted, and that will help us. Feel free to put any questions or thoughts or ideas in the chat box. We will be moderating that and looking at that. And Bailey is going to be running our Zoom room today. And I'm excited to introduce the chamber team. Bailey first, Kara Matheson, Anna Dowd, and Nicole Langmaid. So I am now excited to introduce Anna Dowd, and she's going to introduce our sponsor, Bankers Trust. Thank you, Bankers Trust.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Catherine. And big thank you to Bankers Trust for being our West Des Moines Edge presenting sponsor for all of 2021. So we couldn't be more excited to have them on board. And with us today to speak on behalf of Bankers Trust is Rob Reinert. So thank you, Rob, for joining us. And I will give you the virtual stage.
Thank you, Anna. On behalf of Bankers Trust, we're excited to support the West Des Moines Chamber and all its growth and all its goals. I know there's a number of things that's going on here in the community, and we just love to participate with you. I know the speakers today will provide us with lots of great information. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to you, Anna, and let the big boys talk.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Rob. And again, huge thank you to Bankers Trust for being our presenting sponsor.
Well, I'm excited. We're going to get our program rolling because there's so much great content, and I'm excited to pass the baton, the virtual baton here, to Kathy Bolten with the Business Record. You know, this is pretty cool to have her here. I worked there for many, many years, and it's so fun to be with part of our Business Record family today. So Kathy, thank you so much for moderating this wonderful event.
Thanks for inviting me, Catherine. I really appreciate it. I want to introduce the panelists again, just let you know where they're from and who they are. Chris Costa, who's president and CEO of Knapp Properties. Kevin Crowley, chief operating officer and manager at NAI Iowa Realty Commercial. Kevin Gamble, executive vice president of Hubbell Realty Company. Richard Hurd, founder and president of Hurd Real Estate, and Paul Rupprecht, president and of R&R Real Estate Advisors. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining. We're going to kick it off with a sort of a general softball question. And why don't we just go around the horn, just like I just mentioned, starting with Chris, and sort of what has been the pandemic's overall impact on the commercial real estate market in the greater Des Moines area? Chris?
Well, I'm just really going to, well, first of all, thanks for having me. Really just going to hit on all little phases of the real estate, and I'll mention one or two things where I think it's had an impact. But multifamily, I would say the impact is would be it's created softness in the market. Offsetting that, there's been an incredible cap rate compression that's been going on in our market. So with multifamily, I'd say there's good and bad. It's been an interesting year. Office, I'd say the number one thing is employees are not occupying offices. And that's a challenge that we're all going to have to figure out how we're going to deal with that going forward. Retail, the word of the day for me is concessions. And I know Richard will have a lot to say about retail, but what little retail we have, we've worked as best we can with our tenants to keep them afloat and maintain occupancy. And then finally, industrial, and you'll hear this a lot today, but so much has moved into the distribution of online sales that it is really created an opportunity in the industrial field.
Thanks, Chris. Kevin? You need to unmute, Kevin.
Thanks everybody for telling me that. I have people in my office yelling at me too. Anyway, so the pandemic's created a barbell effect of opportunities and challenges in the local economy. You know, we've seen increased growth in industrial logistics, as Chris said, and warehousing. You know, Amazon is a large driver of that. Amazon has leased or built almost 3 million square feet in the metro area in the past, you know, really 24 months, which is amazing. And so that's exciting. We've seen unprecedented demand in investment quality real estate that Chris was talking about, and I'm sure Richard's going to speak of. And really that same capital is chasing apartments too. And while the office and retail markets have definitely, you know, been impacted in a negative way, you know, we think that there's going to be a way out of this. And so, you know, overall, you know, I think we've done a good job of surviving the pandemic, and the long-term effects will linger for a bit, but I think in the end, we're going to be okay.
Thanks, Kevin. Kyle?
Yeah, I'm going to echo. I think we're all going to probably say a little bit of similar comments here, but I would say the impact has been mixed in terms, and I'll start with the capital markets and specifically the sale of investment property. We've really never seen it this strong. There's a tremendous amount of liquidity chasing multifamily net leased assets, especially the assets that have essential services or essential retail. And then industrial from a capital markets perspective, and actually from a leasing perspective as well, is stronger than pre-pandemic levels. And I'm sure there's some bankers on the Zoom call here, and debt equity has been readily available. Liquidity has been extremely high, although it is trending a little bit more conservative. We're seeing a little bit more strict underwriting of just about all assets. And I would say that, you know, we have seen from a transaction perspective, just about any property that's priced smart in this market has had buyers, and sometimes multiple buyers in tow. And then in terms of the leasing activity, as Chris and Kevin have already alluded to, there's some softness in the office and retail sectors, some tangible softness. And while the impact on the retail market was pretty immediate, we may not see the full impact of the pandemic on the office market for the next 12, 24, 36 months. So while I'm optimistic across the market and all sectors that Des Moines is going to recover and has already started to recover quite well, some of the impacts we're going to see and deal with for quite a while.
Thanks, Kyle. Richard?
Yeah, I would agree with basically everything I've heard from the first three panelists with regards to the macro view of the market. What, you know, our little niche of the market, what we've seen is it's really, COVID has created a market of haves and have-nots. And so our large tenants are struggling to meet demand, and our smaller tenants are struggling to survive. And that's been the biggest change for us during the COVID period. The other point that I would make is that the investment market, which we are very active in, has been wildly active. And we have had, I think I counted up, we've had 12 transactions, sales and acquisitions in the last 60 days, which is quite a few for a small company like ours. So, I mean, we've sold a lot and we've acquired a lot. And as Kyle pointed out, if you have product that is meeting the market, by that I mean if you have properties that have essential users that are not subject to being shut down during a pandemic and are providing essential services, and it's a strong company, there's a huge demand for that type of product. And so we've been working during this period, you know, with our properties in that regard. And just watching to see what happens. A lot of money is flowing in here, obviously, from out of state and from the coast, which also drives the market to a new height as well.
Thanks, Richard. Paul?
Yeah, I think we all could agree that 2020 will go on record as one of the most disruptive years in modern history. You know, the short-term changes were drastic and every sector was impacted with COVID. And the long-term changes, you know, there's still so much uncertainty in the marketplace. And an example, you know, we have quite a bit of office property, and we have around 300 office tenants, and we probably literally have 300 different back to work plans. So uncertainty still exists. And then as far as the long-term trends go, I mean, it's probably just accelerated some of these trends. I mean, I've heard e-commerce, and I would agree. Healthy buildings was always something that we had discussed in the office market, and the pandemic obviously has accelerated those trends.
Well, thank you. I'm going to throw you a curveball because a couple of you talked about investors being interested in Greater Des Moines. Why are those outside investors so attracted to the Des Moines area? Kyle, do you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, as Chris alluded to, you know, there's been tremendous cap rate compression, especially in the coast. So it's driven a chase for yield. And so we've seen, and Richard alluded to this as well, there are a tremendous amount of outside of the state investors looking in Iowa for better returns. We haven't seen the cap rate compression that is witnessed on the coast. So those buyers are driven here to see if they can acquire property at a slightly higher cap rate and drive better returns. They also, the stability and the predictability of the central Iowa and greater and the Iowa market is something that's attractive to most investors. There is a pattern of success here. There's a pattern of growth. And with that comes, you know, demand for good quality property. If there's good credit in place, there will be an attractive set of buyers out there that will pursue that asset.
Does anybody else want?
If you don't mind, to add to that, we have an apartment project in West Des Moines, 120 units. And in the last 6 weeks, I bet I've fielded 10 to 15 calls from entities in the Midwest and nationally that have identified really West Des Moines multifamily as a real estate asset that they want to own. And it's not just our property they're after all kinds of West Des Moines properties. The stability that Kyle mentioned in our market certainly helps, but the cap rates that these investors are willing to pay have, they open my eyes every time that they call and tell me what range they're going to be in. Our challenge is, if we sell a good asset, what other asset are we going to get into if we want to continue to be real estate investors? So it's a good time to be, if you're looking to divest and be a seller, especially in multifamily, the rates that are being offered or the prices being sought after are just phenomenal.
I might mention what Chris is talking about. I'm sure, Chris, that's just unsolicited interest. Those
just out of the blue. Right?
Yeah, they're not even on the market. They're just calling in to say, would you be a seller? Right. When you put one on the market that's, you know, has a track record of performance, there's a long list of buyers that want to acquire.
Anybody else want to add anything to that?
Well, I would add that, we have sold to unsolicited buyers a number of properties in the last few months. And I can't tell you how many inquiries we have on a daily or weekly basis, because basically what we own is investment properties. So, and they're not all Iowa. They're spread around through 15 states, but still we're getting so much influx of interest from buyers that we've never really seen this type of penetration into the marketplace for out of state inquiries to buy things. And we've sold I mean, we've sold to California buyers, New York buyers, Colorado. I mean, there's a lot of money chasing real estate in Central Iowa right now for all the reasons that Chris and Kyle mentioned. You know, a lot of it's yield based. People sell things for very low cap rates on the coast, and we do have a stable market here. We don't have the highs and lows, and I think there's some value in that for people that are bringing their money from the coast.
Yeah, I would echo the same thing, that we are getting unsolicited phone calls of people just looking for off-market deals if we have any information. And, you know, it's just kind of funny. They don't know I'm going to call Richard first, so they keep calling us.
Paul, do you have anything to add, or?
I think the panel covered it very well.
Okay. So one of the things we're seeing sort of at least from my perspective, a spike in is an increase in mixed use developments, especially in West Des Moines. Valley Junction's got a project underway. There's one planned on 8th Street. I think there's 2 or 3 others planned in Valley Junction. What makes these mixed use projects so enticing and for developers? And by mixed use, I mean there's retail, there's apartments, there could be offices. What is behind these types of developments? Kevin, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. I see that, support retail is something that garners some interest, and, Valley Junction has had a number of retailers over the years. Some have been successful, some have struggled. And, really Valley Junction's maturing as a market, and, there is a demand for residential multifamily apartments down there. So, there are 2 or 3 projects, one's underway and there's a couple more on the board. And, I think they'll be successful because they're serving a need. Well, at the same time, Valley Junction still has parking for, the retail tenants so that they can get business besides the local residents also. So, Valley Junction's done a good job of attracting, new business to its, it's a fun place to go on any night of the week, really. There's just a lot of activity going on, and there's some great restaurants and bars down there. So it's a fun place now.
Anyone else?
I think I would comment that I think that the cities like to see that type of a development because it brings a community feel, a sense of neighborhood, a sense of place, some walkability, some bikeability scenarios. In certain scenarios, land is expensive, so you want to maximize your land, and so you tend to go up with it. So you have some retail office on the first floor, you have apartments above. One thing that I would caution about is in certain scenarios, you can run into a scale issue with small mixed use that's dependent upon both retail and or multifamily. Gone are the days where a retail bay can be built out for $25 to $35 a square foot. And if a mixed use product is not extremely well located, primary location for retail, the retail component can be a challenge, especially in today's market. So while mixed use is kind of an attractive and really the flavor of the year or flavor for developers right now, it does have some challenges unless it's, has some scale to it. You can easily in a small scale product run over 10% vacancy very quickly, and that makes it difficult to pencil. So we've experienced it firsthand in a couple of projects recently, and mixed use is attractive, but it's also has its intricacies that have to be dealt with.
Yeah, I would add mixed use. Everybody wants convenience, and it's great and it's convenient to live, work, and play. One of the challenges is when you put it under one roof, and we deal with neighboring tenants, and everybody wants convenience, but they want quiet enjoyment, and they want good neighbors too. And so that's another concern in how we've handled mixed uses with really kind of standalone buildings. We've done office parks, and we've purposely tried to incorporate services within the park, whether it be food, daycares, but they're really standalone buildings, and try to create it that way. We haven't tried or attempted to do it under one roof.
I think, and I love that there's some developers out there taking some chances on some mixed use developments in Valley Junction, because that's an area that really could use some unique redevelopment. So congratulations to them, and I hope they work out. I would say from our perspective, mixed use is a mixed bag, and it is generally a unique situation where you can have the kind of success you were hoping to have, capturing both the commercial side of things and the residential side of things. And I know this isn't West Des Moines, but the one bigger mixed use project we did was a partnership with Hy-Vee at 4th and Court downtown. And that was a great mixed use project from our perspective, because you had a significant first floor tenant. And like Kyle mentioned, sometimes land prices they get high, so you want to maximize, going up, and multifamily made a lot of sense there. So I'm not saying they don't ever make sense for Knapp properties, but it is a tough and unique type of investment.
Thank you. So one of our viewers wants me to ask the panel about senior living. What's the outlook of building more of these communities in the greater Des Moines area? And she's talking about independent, 55 and older, assisted, skilled. So what is the outlook for having more senior living units in the greater Des Moines area? Kyle, I know you guys have some.
So I can take that one. We have about 268 units right now across 5 communities, and we have one that's being expanded and one under construction. The units today are assisted living and memory care. The one that's under construction has an independent living component to it as well. Obviously, we're bullish on the senior living sector. We've seen quite a bit of success with the 5 communities that we have in place right now. Our average occupancy is about 92%. COVID was difficult. It was difficult on both the residents and the employees. Right now, our resident population is roughly 96% vaccinated. The employee population is a little bit lower than that. But long-term as an asset, absolutely. We think that the demographics work in the favor of that asset class. We think there's demand in Central Iowa and across the state. So it's something that we're bullish on and going to continue to develop.
Anybody else want to add anything to that?
I think Kyle really hit it on the head. I think senior living is, as the baby boomers start to age up, that senior living is going to be a much more attractive option. Although I think COVID has put a little bit of a pallor on that. But I think that, if we were going to go shop for senior living, I'd want to make sure that the air handling systems are modern and clean and those types of things. But there's still a great future for senior housing in greater Des Moines.
Is there any concern that the area could be overbuilt with senior housing?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question. We've seen an oversupply in multifamily. We can easily see an oversupply in senior living. The supply and demand drivers are going to be a factor going forward. There are significant projects that have just come online or will be coming online in the marketplace. So yes, it's something we watch all the time. As I mentioned, right now, our occupancies are strong, very, very few delinquencies. So if it's well located, if it's designed correctly, if it has the right it's amenitized correctly, senior living can be, we're going to start calling it silver living, is my understanding, but I think it can be a very attractive asset class.
So moving back to sort of what's going on in West Des Moines, we've got an area around Grand Avenue. Des Moines University's developing its 88-acre campus. We've got the Mid-American Recplex going in that area, but there still remains a lot of undeveloped ground there. What do you gentlemen see being developed in that area, which is, what is it, south and west of Glen Oaks? Richard, do you want to take a stab at that?
Well, I'll be happy to respond. I think, Knapp Properties owns a lot of land out there, and I think R&R has some land out there. We don't own anything in that immediate neighborhood. We own up on Mill Civic and Jordan Creek and 88th, but I think it's dynamic what's going on. I mean, to have the Recplex out there, to have a brand new university built from the ground up, which is not happening very often in the whole country right now, at 88th and Grand, is very exciting. So, what fills in around it, I would guess that it's going to be things that support it. I mean, all the things you need to make a university work. I mean, you're going to need, food, you're going to need apartments, you're going to need, office supply stores, things that go along with universities, and down on by the Recplex, I think you'll see more of that type of thing. And it just stands to reason that that's going to attract more and more outdoor sports activities down there.
Chris?
Kathy, being a parent that lived about 7 years on the road going to AAU basketball tournaments, and I know that there's a couple of parents here that are hockey parents. The Recplex with their 2 sheets of ice, their 4 basketball courts, and their indoor-outdoor soccer field will attract regional, events. And so literally on weekends, that area is going to fill up. So I think really probably a hotel or two will wind up in that area, both to support business activities and then the weekend activities. And, it's going to be fantastic because there will be people from, literally 5 or 6 states will be traveling to, the Recplex probably, 4 times a year for different events. And so it's really exciting. And I think, I really compliment the city for pulling that off and getting it done, because it's a great asset. I got a tour through there a couple of weeks ago, and it's beautiful.
I'd 100% agree with Kevin. My kids have played travel hockey since they've been 4 years old. So I've traveled all over the Midwest, all over the Northeast. I can tell you that ice sporting is a huge demand driver, and that complex is about 5 years too late. We've needed that complex for a long time, and it's going to be a game changer for that area. There's going to be tournaments that will be hosted in Des Moines that have never been hosted in Des Moines, and it's going to drive, as Kevin mentioned, hotel development, retail development, support services. It's going to be an exciting addition to West Des Moines and the greater Des Moines area.
Yeah, and I guess I just add, those of us who represent different land holdings in central Iowa certainly have had opportunities over the last 3 to 5 years where cities see youth sports as an economic development opportunity. And they want to be able to attract all of these regional tournaments that Kevin and Kyle are talking about. So we've seen in central Iowa, I mean, almost every municipality that we have land in, there's been opportunities over the last few years. What I think West Des Moines did right, and I don't think these work without this kind of a relationship, it was a public-private opportunity. And West Des Moines got behind it in terms of investment. And it is easier to bring a project like that forward. And I give them a lot of credit. They issued bonds against TIF and supplied a great deal of financial backing to that project. But that's what you need to do to create these opportunities. And just like Richard said, this is going to fill in with all of the types of uses you'd expect to have around a venue like that. It might take a few years, the pandemic will set it back, but West Des Moines not only invested in the Recplex, they invested in the infrastructure needed to improve that whole area. So it will speed up development because now you have the streets and the sewers and the water, all the types of infrastructure you need to bring those potential types of uses along. So they've, with Des Moines U and Recplex, West Des Moines did it right.
Yeah, you know, and I had a chance, I was out in the Quad Cities, I think it was Bettendorf, but TBK Bank Sports Complex out there. I was just amazed on the development that popped in around it. But I think that's where this area is headed.
Yep.
I'd also add that, you know, with DMAC being there, with Des Moines University being there, I could see, this is probably a long-term comment, but I could see additional kind of specialized education or research type occupiers gravitating to that area. And you could see some kind of educational type corridor, maybe some STEM users, flex step tech type development there. But it could become a kind of an educational area for West Des Moines, for the city.
Yeah, to add that college technology, I think that's kind of the area I see as well too, sure.
So to our viewers, if you have some questions you'd like me to ask the panelists, feel free to direct message me and I'll do my best to get those questions answered. We're going to move on for a minute to industrial and warehouse development, which we alluded to earlier with Amazon and all the online, growth in e-commerce. So Paul, why don't you talk a little bit about why this segment of the real estate market is booming and where you see it heading in the next 12 to 18 months in the Des Moines area?
Yeah, well, it's pretty apparent. I mean, obviously, quite a bit of development in Ankeny and Altoona has really been exploding in the area. We've been really kind of centered around the northwest sector, which we have quite a bit of space. And I think growth is still happening in that sector. I think when you see the infrastructure changes with the urban loop and, you know, the flyover and the improvements on 141, the interchanges at Meredith and Hunter Street, I think that is still viable, and growth will certainly happen in that area as well. We've got a strong base of existing companies that lease industrial warehouse space. We're seeing growth on the e-commerce side, especially the last mile hubs. I think we all know Amazon placed their hub in the Grimes area, and we've gotten some inquiries from other last mile type operations. So. You know, the other thing about in the warehousing industry, we've actually done deals, people storing PPE. Now, granted, that's probably short term, but you never know how long that lasts. But that was something that came about. The other thing is we're also seeing a huge increase in need for outside storage, parking. I think that's going to be key. I think cities will need to work with developers to allow for that outside storage. That's what
I'm sorry, outside storage for what types of things?
Well, lots of things. It could be storing trailers, could be storing product. You know, there's a lot of different needs for it, but we're seeing a lot more now. Before it was a request, now it's becoming more of a requirement. So you're going to need additional land to be able to create that area that they can provide parking, storage. And that's going to be key for growth in this industry.
Anyone else?
You know, Kathy, the Amazon growth is phenomenal. And now one of the questions that we are looking at is what kind of other warehouse and distribution does that spin off? And there's at least a 1-to-1 ratio, and it might be 1 to 2. So if Amazon's almost at 3 million square feet in the metro, that's really going to cause 3 million square feet of new space to be developed in our market. And, you know, that's really exciting because it's just going to create additional demand. And we are seeing the logistics companies coming to Altoona and Ankeny looking for space. So, Kyle, you leased your new building in Ankeny, didn't you?
Very close, very close. But to piggyback on what Kevin said, you know, we're seeing inquiries now for reverse logistics. We have a tremendous amount of product being delivered to the end user. Well, a percentage of that product is being returned. So to Kevin's point, with the influx of Amazon and/or last mile distributors comes that reverse logistics that we will start to see as occupiers in the market. There's also some safety stock taking place in this marketplace to kind of counteract supply chain disruptions. And COVID has especially accelerated some supply chain issues. So we're seeing some of the larger third-party logistics and direct users require safety stock of their products so they can get those distributed on a timely basis.
Chris, what are you seeing in this area?
You know, we don't do a ton in this kind of space, but I will say we're dealing with a rather large entity that's wanting to set up a distribution center in central Iowa. And these distribution centers are almost always, if they've got any kind of need, greater than 500,000 feet. I mean, they're 500,000 to a 1.5 million feet, which is something that I don't know how often we've seen in central Iowa over the last 10 or 15 years. That seems like a more recent phenomenon, but I think there are opportunities out there still for distribution centers, which seems like we would have used up a lot of those opportunities. They're still coming along.
For anybody, is there also an increased need for cold storage? I mean, we're seeing more and more the grocery store delivery, people having their groceries delivered to their home. Is there a need for more cold storage area, storage in the area?
Yeah, Kathy, there's actually a nationwide shortage of cold storage, and Des Moines Cold Storage expanded, just prior to COVID, not anticipating that. But the whole cold storage business got flipped around because all of a sudden grocery demand increased while restaurants, institutional, hotel, et cetera, decreased. And so, we've literally had clients looking for cold storage and there's none to be found. I mean, and that's true all throughout the United States and very true here in central Iowa.
Are we going to be seeing more, construction of cold storage then?
I believe you will, but it's an expensive endeavor, and it's really a specialized endeavor also. So it's really someone that's going to be, knows how to handle that product. So it'll be by demand.
Well, do you guys have questions you want to ask each other? Don't all speak at once.
I want to know when Kevin's going to bring us a tenant, some of our office buildings.
There's a long list, Chris. So we're trying to get there. We'll get there soon.
Okay, well, let's move on and let's sort of talk about the state of retail real estate in the Des Moines area. Everyone alluded to the problems, the concerns there are. So Richard, why don't you just sort of kick it off, since that's something near and dear to your heart?
Well, I think the thing about retail is it's very in your face, right? So it has got a lot of attention, because if you go to your favorite store and it's no longer open, or your favorite restaurant and they're no longer open, people notice it. It's really got a lot of attention, and there's been a lot of stress in the restaurant, the hospitality, the movie theaters, the gyms. All those high touch type uses have been really impacted by COVID. And a lot of them, may not be able to survive. A lot of them may have to completely change their business model if they are to survive. And then the other side of it is the essential retailers have just been inundated, as Kevin was talking about on the industrial side. I mean, all of this stuff is tied together. If you're buying more groceries to eat at home, that means distribution to the grocery stores has to increase. Distribution to restaurants has to decrease. And so the at-home phenomena, from food, from work, from office equipment, all that has been a big boost for those companies that provide those types of products, and has been a real detriment to the ones that have relied on people coming into their facility, sitting down and having a high touch experience, whether it's a gym or hotel or a restaurant that you sit down and eat at. So, I mean, basically where we are today is that the survivors are doing exceptionally well, and a lot of them are changing their, their format. I mean, I'd say that display areas are shrinking to a certain extent, and warehouses are increasing because they're using their stores for last mile distribution. They're using them for curbside pickup. They're doing things to adapt to this changing environment that really no one that I'm aware of saw coming in early 2020. So it's a matter of trying to understand where the market is, see where you fit into it, and adapt as quickly as you possibly can.
Richard, didn't ICSC come out with a study saying for every 1,000 square feet of retail that closes, it causes 10,000 square feet of distribution space need, or some crazy statistic? Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I read it. I don't recall the specific numbers, but it's true. I mean, and Kyle alluded to it on, the reverse distribution. I mean, every time you buy a shirt, Crowley, and it's on Amazon, and you buy 2 of them because they're 2 for the price of 1, and then you get them and they don't fit, and then you punch the button and they come to pick it up. It's got to go somewhere. I mean, it's got to go somewhere. And generally they don't go back to the retailer. They go to the wholesalers, and they end up at Ross or Burlington or TJ or one of those places is where they end up. But between the time it leaves your house and it ends up on the floor of one of those discounters, that's a whole new industry that's been basically exploding since COVID hit. And I think Paul may have mentioned it, but all these trends that we're seeing were already in motion pre-COVID. COVID just advanced everything by about 5 years and 5 months. And so, what we're experiencing is just a complete cram down in the retail world of things that we were headed toward, that we had to accelerate, and people that would have never bought anything online were buying things online by necessity, not by desire, but by necessity. And they probably aren't going to quit. They'll continue to buy things online.
Kevin, I think Hubbell's most recent retail survey for the 4th quarter showed there's more vacancy now than a year ago by about, 3 or 4 percentage points.
Sure.
What is going on?
Well, in retail right now, the old real estate adage of location, location, location. I can't tell you that it's just such a true adage, and that really, if you have secondary retail space or retail space that's aged out, you have a challenge, because the retail market has changed, and now you really have people wanting to move to Jordan Creek Mall area, or they don't necessarily want to be in the Valley West Mall neighborhood anymore. And so location is really important, and good locations still lease and they still sell. We had the Granite City building for sale and literally put it under contract in a short period of time, and it took the buyers a while to close, but they paid a good price, the same price that the people that sold it for had bought it for over 10 years ago. So it's about location, location, location right now, and retail is challenged. And before the pandemic started, Rich and I had spoken to a couple of different groups, and Richard would tell people, he said, hey, if you really like your retailers, you better start supporting them or they're going to go away. Isn't that true, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, where we stand in the universe. I'm talking macro now. If you like stores, and if you like to have the opportunity to go to a store and buy things, you need to support them. If you don't care, just keep buying everything on Amazon, because that's where we're headed. Stores can only survive if they have business. And if the local community or the national community doesn't support stores will go away. So I think, it's it's a decision that the buying public is making with their dollars, right? So every time my wife buys something on Amazon, she's taking a sale away from a local store. And I mean, sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it isn't. It's just convenience. But I think we really need to decide whether or not we want to have stores. If we do, then we got to support them. We have to buy things from them.
Kyle, you talked earlier about retail concessions, more of that going on. Can you expand on that?
Well, sure. I mean, especially in what I'm seeing in the kind of call it the neighborhood retail center, and especially those that are in secondary locations, it's difficult for retailers that are what I would classify as local or sole proprietors to make deals pencil today, especially if you're having to do significant tenant improvements. It's difficult for them to justify the rent, the amortization of tenant improvements and the operating expenses, and then still be able to conduct a good business. 30% of the tenants that we're seeing that are coming through some of these neighborhood centers are true retailers. The rest of them are professional services, financial services, some office component users or medical, and in some cases entertainment. But at the end of the day, as I mentioned with regards to the mixed use, it's the same scenario in these small bay retail. Gone are the days of a $25 tenant improvement allowance that really builds out the space to where the tenant can use it. Today, it's anywhere from $50 to $100 a square foot. So it puts a lot of pressure on that retailer to be able to survive. Thus, concessions are necessary in some cases to give them that ability to at least start up their business and get a footing and get up and running.
Yeah, what Kyle's talking about in construction is phenomenal. The cost of new construction is mind-blowing. And, over the years, we've watched, buildings built in, Paul, R&Rs, depending on what year their office park was built, their net rent is kind of related to some of the original net rent that was started at that time. And, new construction, you're, pushing $20 net rent, and TIs are running $80 to $100 for office space, and retail's the exact same way. It's just very expensive to build out any space right now. And so, that is something that's a challenge to, all businesses.
Getting back to the concession conversation, I think most of us would agree that it's a lot easier to keep a tenant than to try to re-tenant the space. And we know some of these retail tenants are hurting, and we hope a lot of it is temporary because of the virus situation. So we've worked with several of our retail tenants to help them get through this period of time in hopes that in the long run, it's going to pay off for us, and that we'll have a happy long-term tenant in the space instead of trying to turn it over like these guys talked about, which is generally a pretty expensive undertaking for a landlord.
Well, we've got about 6 minutes or so left. So let's talk about office. And Paul, you, in your opening statements, sort of talked about you've got 300 different office tenants and 300 different plans to return to work. So what is going on with office in the greater Des Moines area, and what will be going on in 12 to 18 months? Well,
there's a lot going on, and probably first of all, there's, we did, the owner occupied building. So we've really gone through kind of a patch here where you've seen Come and Go, IMT, Salmons, John Deere, Iowa Bankers Association. There's been a lot of owner-occupied buildings constructed in the area, and that has created a vacancy. And then you throw in the pandemic on that as well too. But what I kind of want to gravitate and talk a little bit about the effect on the pandemic and what it has on the workforce, because lockdowns and isolated working environments, especially for the young people, is starting to take its toll. I think now more than ever we need to invest in our young people. It really, they're the future leaders of our organizations and our industries. And current leaders really need to start providing that mentoring, coaching, and create that collaborative culture that those young people really crave and need. And I think real estate will certainly play a big role in that. So that's going to be important. But healthy buildings, that's what it's going to be about. The employees need to feel safe of coming back to the office. And this is nothing new. This is something that we've always talked about. It's going to be, we're, trying to create outdoor collaboration areas, in our new Westfield building that we built before COVID even hit. We knew it was important to put a rooftop patio to allow outdoor collaboration areas. We provide outdoor collaboration areas. But we have Iowa, right? We have hot summers and frigid winters. And so HVAC and fresh air, that's going to be critical too, in making sure that we're able to do that. But there's a cost associated. We can provide more fresh air into the buildings, but then you're just heating or cooling that new air, and it becomes a real strain on cost. And so you're really kind of balancing that. But we're partnering with, you really have to, just as a landlord, you have to partner with your tenants. You have to work through the issues. Relationships matter in office for the longevity of it. I think office space will still be relevant, but we'll just have to get through the headwinds and get through this.
So Paul talked a little bit about healthy buildings. How do you go about retrofitting a existing office building to make sure it's healthy? And Chris, I know you guys are doing that with your building there on 5th, is it?
Yeah, the building downtown, which we, fortunately, we were in a situation where we could completely overhaul the HVAC system there. We were going to take out the old and put in a new, and so the new system will be much more compliant with the types of issues that Paul is bringing up. But some of the other buildings where you're just trying to attract new tenants, you're going to have to get somewhat creative with the different options you can provide with air handling. There's different filtering systems that landlords are looking at. There's different ways to kill viruses in the ductwork through specialized lighting. I think these are all amenities that tenants are going to be looking for over the next, certainly now until the next 2-3 years, we get through a big part of this pandemic. Then, as it relates to just general office vacancies, what we're seeing with our portfolio is tenants are wanting, if their lease is up for renewal, they want a short-term extension because they want to keep their options open, or they'll go with a 5-year type of extension with an early termination option. And tenants have always sought out early termination options. That's really nothing new, but I think landlords are probably in a position where it's a little more appealing to give that kind of a right in a lease now than it was several years ago, just because we know in order to attract tenants, we're going to have to be flexible. Tenants want flexibility, and the landlords are going to have to provide that with their leasing terms.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that same thing even in the financial crisis. It was kind of the same way. I think it almost everybody just kind of froze, and short-term renewals, short-term extensions, terminations was kind of the old blend and extend was also done. A lot of that, and for the most part, we're seeing even some of those, the blend and extends coming back a little bit. We've had to do rent deferrals to try to get them through some of the tougher times, and those have gone great. Those have, again, the government's pumping a lot of money into the economy as well too, and that's helping kind of bridge the gap.
Anybody else want to add anything on that topic?
Oh, just in the office in general, there's no easy answer for employers, and employers are really trying to be sensitive to their employees. And so, I think we're going to see hybrid schedules where people work Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, or Tuesdays, Thursdays. And, Paul mentioned work culture, and, corporate culture is going to be important, and you really can't do that over Zoom. So it's important that people get back to the office and start touching. Now, I think we're starting to see a lot of small local companies actually get back to work, and that's kind of refreshing. And, they have mask protocols and they have safety things, but people are going back to work, and, hopefully we'll start seeing some of the larger companies jump on that same bandwagon and, start coming back to work. And I'm hoping to see that sooner rather than later.
Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time this morning. The conversation was enlightening. Catherine, back to you.
Really appreciate it. I think we've covered so much in your industry, and there's a lot of terms I'm not even familiar with. So Kathy, I'm so glad you moderated this event. It was very, very informative. Chris, Kevin, Kyle, Richard, Paul, really, you are our leaders in this community. I'm excited. We have on the line with us Renee Hardman, who works incredibly hard on behalf of our city. She is our city councilwoman, chamber champion. She's on our board. She works in so many areas, and I really want to give her the floor for a moment. She wanted to say hi to everybody, and Renee, thank you for being here.
Oh my goodness, thank you, Catherine. And I wanted to thank the panelists. I've seen and worked with each of you as we go about the business of making West Des Moines one of the best cities here in the state of Iowa. And all of you play a key role to that. So thank you. And I have taken a page full of notes on some of your insights and what your thoughts are. But I do want to ask you about Valley West Mall. I walk inside the malls in the wintertime. I was just at Jordan Creek the other day, and I ran into my friend, Mr. Hurd, as I was walking, and I occasionally walk Valley West, and I'm going to be honest, I get a little depressed when I see all the signs and empty spaces. In a perfect world, what would you like to see in that Valley West area, as we probably need to invest in some redevelopment of that space?
Kevin, you want to start?
Anyone giving it some thought? It's a big, huge place right in the center of West Des Moines.
Renee,
all the time.
Renee, I look at Valley West Mall every morning when I come to work and see it when I leave at night. And it's tough seeing it go through the current transition. I think that we as a community need to look around the country and see what other people are doing with malls that have gone through the same type of economic changes that Valley West has, and just see what best practices are for developing that use. We've seen some of those actually become distribution centers and last mile centers and pickup areas. But, until, I think before the pandemic, Valley West Mall was on a good path of looking at entertainment, recreation events, or, centers, and they were on a good path. I think, really that the site's going to have to be redeveloped into mixed use, probably some apartments, maybe some condos, some senior housing. But, it's going to be tough in that the market is finite. And so there's only, retailers can go to so many places. And right now the rooftops and the demographics drive them towards Jordan Creek and not Valley West. And so, we have to come up with a creative way to solve the Valley West dilemma.
And I, Kevin, you're right on. Why recreate the wheel? Let's look at what somebody else has done, and if that makes sense to duplicate here, let's go down that road. But what I'm most encouraged by is the city is willing to throw some financial support into the project, because I just don't even begin to see how you redevelop that without significant contributions from the public side of things. And I hate to think that the public support is always necessary in these kind of situations, but this certainly seems to be one where it would make a lot of sense.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
I love it, you guys. Well, thank you so much. And I have a couple of facts while we end our program today. So in 2020, even during a pandemic, the city of West Des Moines saw the second highest level of building permit activity in our history, totaling 690 million. That is super impressive. West Des Moines remains on the list of 100 cities with a AAA bond rating. Incredible. Our city grows by 1,000 approximately a year. And we are now the 6th largest city in the state of Iowa, and growing, as you heard today. So I cannot wait until all these projects come to fruition. And we're going to be doing this every year, you guys. So it's going to be neat to talk about DMU, and maybe DMU will change their name to West Des Moines University. So I don't know. That joke never gets old. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. We wish everybody a wonderful and safe afternoon. Thank you, Kathy, again for being our stellar moderator. And thank you to our expert panel. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.